Shirley Nelson, Budget Advisory Commission.
Alden Clarence, Deputy City Manager. Dan Moore, Treasurer.
Robert Harris, CFO.
Patrick Flynn.
And Mr. Bosky's on the line. Mr. Bosky?
Hello, good morning.
Welcome. Elsie Gray Johnson.
Dave Training.
Tim Steele.
Forrest Dunbar. Bill Evans.
Tom Weddleton.
Pete Peterson.
In the audience.
Suzanne Fleet Green, Mayor's Office. Hillary Kelly again. Roselia. Rose Williams, and Rebecca.
Thank you. And Hillary Financial Services, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to report that the municipality is in good financial status at the moment, and Mr. Wilbur and Mr. Wall probably give a few comments about both the expense side and the revenue side.
Thank you. Okay, update on the 2016 budget, Mr. Wilbur.
Madam Chair, if I could, maybe I could ask Dan to start on the revenue side, and then I can go to that, to follow up with Mr. Harrison on the fiscal report. Would that be okay with you?
That would be great. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Moore.
Okay, thank you. I don't have a specific new number to provide, an overall number. What we provided you last month was a projected revenue variance of $6.8 million, negative $6.8 million. That included areas that were, the primary areas that were the largest were investment earnings, as well as the PFD decline, and then building safety, Fund 181. So that bottom line, $6.8 million negative variance for revenues is still in the ballpark, is what I've been told. I do think what I've been told is that tobacco tax is, through November, is coming strong. So that should be above budget, but we still have December to receive. That's not due till the end of this month. So tobacco tax could come in above budget, and that's not something we projected in our number. However, investment earnings for the month of December could continue to be negative, and that's also a number I don't have. It takes a while for them to compile that in the public finance area. So those two, I'm thinking, could wash themselves out. All the other revenues, we are projecting to be on track with what we told you a month ago. The report that we give you each month, this is the time of year where we stop giving that report because there's too many year-end adjustments and accruals and things that are going on. So the final report from us, it will not be till probably mid-March. And we're just going to wait for the controller division and any other, I think budget's going to be doing some final adjustments through the assembly. So no new big surprises. It's, tobacco tax and investments are the two areas that are have the most movement. And we think they're probably going to offset each other to a big degree.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Mr. Wilbur?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To start with the 2016 budget, on your January 24th meeting, you'll have an AIM for our November expenditure report, as December had yet to be closed. And as of the end of November, we were 91.5% through the fiscal year and about 88.4% spent. So labor and non-labor were pretty close to each other as we get through November. So that's really good. I think as we, from a department for the municipality, general government as a whole, I think that trend will continue in December. So I think we will end under budget for all GG. A couple things to mention as it relates to 2016. Dan mentioned them. We are working with departments to appropriate 2016 budgeted dollars to meet 2016 expenses. A lot of those expenses are coming in 16. We have some grants that are coming in for 2016, and we're going to appropriate the 2016 budget to match those 2016 grants. So we have a little bit of cleanup. You'll see those coming through your assembly meetings. You'll see some on the 24th, and then you'll see the rest of them on the 14th. The last item I just want to make you aware of, as we are seeing right now, as we've been working with the fire department, while overall all departments are coming in under budget, the fire department, it looks like they may require a supplemental of about $1 million, which is, just to be aware of that. I've been working very closely with Chief LeBlanc and I've just received those, and my staff will be reviewing those this week. And then when we have that finalized, review it, we're working to make sure that number is accurate for 2016. Follow-up paperwork will come through the assembly requesting your review and approval of a supplemental for fire. So 2016 overall, through all general government, doing very well. Yeah, so OMB has worked on some initial calculations. For those of you who are aware, there's a spending limit initiative, as I understand from Mr. Falsey. If the initiative passes in April, it does not affect our 2017 budget. It would affect our 18 budget. So we've worked on some calculations for 18, and that's, it would probably be at least a $10 million reduction in the budget that we would have to reduce services. And $10 million. As you're aware, the administration has done a lot working with departments to find every single place that we can, find some efficiencies and modify our services. The only place that we would have, the likely place that we would see those reductions coming from is gonna be public safety. And it would
That's my
probably
fear,
be,
we've hired all these officers, and my concern is we're now gonna have to tell them, guess what, 18 you can lay off.
and those decisions haven't been made, but when you look at the way our budget is structured, the percent and how our budget is, percentage of where the allocation of our budget is, a significant amount of it is in police and fire, and then the next big one is in public works. So, and then it goes down from there, transit, then we have some other internal, but it's gonna have a significant impact in our service. We're gonna have to probably lay some people off. I don't see any other way around it.
We're dealing with $10 million.
At least $10 million, that's spending limit this year.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr.
From
Trainer.
18.
Before I go to Mr. Vasca, I have to ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
So, I guess I misunderstood because I thought that the initiative was retroactive and I thought that it would affect 2017, but it's not.
I can confirm that with you, Madam Chair, but I believe that the way the code works is that if initiative passes in April, it can't be retroactive to previously approved budgets. It would take effect for
Well, that's
forward
good news.
budgets.
Mr. Training and Mr. Vasca.
Could you get that in writing from legal force, because it's important enough, I want to be absolutely sure.
Absolutely.
And, thank you, Mr. Trainer. And also, can you, put in writing the effect?
I can do that.
That you just told us?
We'll
Yeah,
provide
that would be
that.
really, really great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Bosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lance, I know you just very casually said the fire department might be over $1 million. That's substantial. In my time, and this includes the time on the Budget Advisory Commission, I've only seen one time where the Assembly was made aware very, very late in the game that the fire department went over their budget. And again, it was the same department. What is the cost driver in this, and why is this not been? Why was this not identified in SLED earlier?
Thank you, Mr. Bowski. So we were aware that the number that the fire department was running hot probably in October. We're not aware of the magnitude, so rather than, until we knew what the cause was, and I just received some information from the chief, partial of it looks to be overtime, partial looks to be leave cash in at the end of the year to date. But as you recall, the fire department did request a supplemental last year, and then we've gone back and looked back in history, and again, the timing of our announcement to you was, again, we didn't want to surprise you, but we didn't want to give you false information.
Well, I would say this is one hell of a surprise. I mean, we're in January, and you're telling us we're $1 million over. It's pretty significant. So you're telling me the two factors for being $1 million over the budget is overtime and what else? And leave cash in. And are those the only two factors we're seeing?
Ms. Dombrowski, those are the two that I'm aware of right now. As I mentioned earlier, I've just received most of the information from the fire department recently, and I haven't had a chance to look at all of those, but when we ask for the proposed supplemental, we'll have an explanation for the reasons for all of those.
Yeah, well, I'd say this is a huge failure because, frankly, being $1 million over your budget and letting the Assembly know in January is not acceptable.
I would also add that, we don't, most of the leave cash-in happens in the month of December, and when that actually gets posted, I think on the 8th of January for the year end for December. So we won't have that information until, we don't know what the full effect is until the end of December, and so this is the earliest opportunity we can share it.
So one of the questions, so this isn't new, this happens every year. I've seen it. My husband's been a firefighter for 17 years. This is nothing new. And departments generally, in the past, has always budgeted for this. They've always, and so my question is there something new this year? Are we having an unusual amount of people cashing out? Maybe they're leaving, retiring, whatever. That would be a question, if that in fact is the cost driver, that could explain why there's a surprise. But those are the kinds of details we need to know because as I said, even if the fire department asked for a supplemental last year, I don't remember it being a big number in January. I remember a couple years ago they asked for $2 million in December, which at that time the assembly was rocked back on their heels, and it was a substantial discussion. It wasn't just this nonchalant, oh, we're $1 million over and we want more. So I think new assembly members need to take heed. This is not normal, and this is something that is unusual, and we need to identify why it happened so late and make sure it doesn't happen again. And the other thing I would just like to point out, I know there's a lot of speak right now about how immediately we're going to have to cut public safety in 2018 and blah blah blah. And I want to point out part of the reason we're as high as we are right now in our budget is over $12 million of the budget was driven by employee costs, and part of that was the $850,000 in raises that was handed out. So we have to put this into perspective and understand that we have intentionally increased the cost of our employees, which generally means you can't have as many of them. So I just want to say that on the record because I think just because you say it doesn't make it so, and I want to see the facts to back it up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. I have a comment before I go to Mr. Evans. Mr. Bosky, we were made aware of the fire department's requesting additional money for 2016 at our December meeting, and at one point I remember the number being 1.5 million. So I'm glad to hear that it's only 1 million now, but I appreciate your comments, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions regarding the spending cap and a comment. The comments I'll let Blake address last. The questions are, because it's going to get attention, and I guess that's the purpose of asking, is this $10 million figure. We don't have a budget for 2018.
Correct.
So, and we do a continuing budget, so we have some estimation about what it's going to cost. But $10 million, are you talking about $10 million, a reduction from our 2017 budget, or a $10 million reduction from a proposed 2018 budget that's going to be higher than the 2017 budget?
Correct.
Okay.
The latter.
The latter.
So
So it's $10 million from a projected budget that is higher than the current year's budget.
right, yes.
Okay. That's, which is an important point.
And the reason I bring that up is we provided the assembly, and the calculations that we're using, we make some assumptions on our 18 and then 19, 20, 21, we sort of look out 6 years. So we make some assumptions on our revenues and our expenditures for 18, and then, but so you're right, they're made on assumptions, those assumptions can change, and so we then apply, the spending limit based on the initiative language, our interpretation of that, based on our assumption of an 18 budget.
So if I'm correct in remembering the number, our this year's general operating budget was 503. What is the budget number you're using for 2018 that's $10 million?
I'm not gonna, I don't wanna guess, but in the request that Mr. Jackson asked about the explanation, I will share that number with you because that's how we got to the Delta number. 10. But we'll add that in there.
And the other question regarding the spending cap thing is we suspended the spending cap for 2 years for the ostensible purpose of studying the spending cap. Are there plans on the Assembly for engaging in that study, and if they are, what are the plans?
Who you asking, Mr. Evans?
I guess I'm asking you as the chair, if we have.
That's the question.
The reason we suspended the cap ostensibly was to study the effects of the spending cap so that we don't just get rid of it without more knowledge. I was just wondering if we do have any kind of plans going forward for that actual study for this body, and if so, what those plans would be.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. That was the intent, and I'm hopeful that the study will begin before April 18th.
Is that going to be a function of this committee, or do we
Oh,
anticipate?
absolutely a function of this committee. A little bit of work outside the committee, but then, definitely bringing information to this committee for a discussion. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't realize this was a pontification session, but I'll contribute a few cents to that. First, my memory is a little bit different than Ms. Dombowski's, perhaps because our tenures have not entirely overlapped, but I think the fire department's been pretty consistently over budget. And one thing I would ask, I don't recall the details of their collective bargaining agreement, but do we have the power to limit leave cash out based on available revenues? Because if we don't, that should be something I think we should bargain for. And if we do, then we should be managing that better than we are. We should not be allowing leave cash out of the department's over budget. Second point is on the spending cap discussion. My understanding is one of the contributing factors to our, we'll call it violation of the spending cap, is that we shifted spending authority from the school district to the municipality back in 2013, if I recall correctly. Maybe it was 2014. And we did so for two reasons. One, the state changed the foundation formula, which reduced our required contribution to the school district. And two, because the administration at the time failed to divulge information about cost overruns for street maintenance, specifically snow plowing. We had about 10 feet of snow accumulation that year. And when it became apparent post-election, happened to be a mayoral election year, the Assembly, by a 9-2 vote, chose not to authorize the supplemental appropriation to pay for that street maintenance. It was an interesting amalgamation of personalities that voted for that, but that had the effect of reducing the 2013 spend, 2012 spend perhaps it was, and therefore impacted the spending cap moving forward. So there's a lot of responsibility associated with this, and I will try to avoid losing my temper when I hear mischaracterizations around it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I appreciate you not losing your temper. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, my question, Mr. Flynn, is, so you're saying that the problem that we're discussing here came about as a result of us arbitrarily reducing the cap, or was that a well-thought-out process that we incorporated?
I wouldn't call it arbitrary, but it certainly was not well thought out. I was there.
So the cap is arbitrarily low, is what you're saying?
The cap is low because there was, well,
Regardless of
I can't
why,
speak to the motivations of the 9 members who voted not to make the supplemental appropriation. That's for them to say for themselves. I think it was a unique combination of circumstances that created a remarkable confluence of motivations.
Anything else, Mr. Steele?
No,
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Hogan, please continue.
Madam Chair.
You will come.
So on 2017 budget, traditionally we do make adjustments in the first quarter. So we're working on a schedule for that, and tentatively we will have that before you in late March, probably in most likely in April. So I've been, since the controller and the treasurer are heavily involved in it as it relates to year-end close and then fund balance projections and all of those things. So we're working on a calendar, and as soon as we have some response from them, I'll share that with Rose, and we'll all have a schedule of how we're moving forward on the first quarter. So that's our process and progress in 2017 to date.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, so we'll go on to the next subject matter. Report from the Budget Advisory Commission, Ms. Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, two things that came out of our last commission meeting was we did a white paper report on property tax reform, just to follow up on some of the issues that we have been keeping in the highlight or in the spotlight since 2014. And I handed a copy of it off to Lance, and I believe you said you did get a copy of it, if,
I believe we all got copies.
We got copies of it.
Yeah.
So it was just us, we wanted to keep reiterating the importance of some of these issues and the mandates that the state are putting on, just so that we could be on record too, and hopefully it gives you tools. And as we probably understand, it will be like stand in line, you know, what's going on right now with all of the issues and so on, but we did wanna at least have that on, record, so it was a good report that Al put out. Secondly, the school district met with us and, gave us a copy of their school board approved, 2017 bond proposals. And you probably have seen that too, and that came in at 58 million on different, and they gave a list of, the different projects that they are looking at. And a lot of it is, roof replacements, stuff that we're looking at. And then just on a side note, one of the commissioners, John Watkins, is a member of the Anchorage Community Mental Health, Inc. And so he gave a little presentation too, and the reason why it affects the budget is they are working with the school district, but it's just working with mental issues and so on and so forth on how if you can get early intervention, it really cuts back on the costs and so on. So it was a good informative topic, and we'd like to pursue it a little bit more to keep it in the conversation as well, because it's in perspective of cost driven and so on. So it's a very important topic. Other than that,
Thank you. Mr. Delbar?
Thank you. Ms. Nelson, I wanted to ask you, and I think the first time I ever heard about the unfunded mandates and the property tax exemptions was at a budget advisory committee meeting. I went to a commission meeting. So I'm sure you've been tracking that it was one of our biggest asks to Juneau, to localize those exemptions. And I was wondering, I have two questions. One, have y'all been able to distribute the white paper to state legislators? And two, are there any members of the commission who, either working with the administration or on their own, have plans to either call into Juneau or to go to Juneau to testify on those issues?
First question, yes, we have given copies. I know Senator Myers has been one. Mio Costello, I believe, has received information as well. As far as a commissioner speaking on behalf, probably not. I don't think that has been planned, but we might look into it. I'm not sure. I think when we go back to what our role is to advise the assembly and the administration to give you some maybe tools to do it on that perspective. But we'd be happy to be more involved, but we have sent copies. And stuff too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delbar. Mr. Trainee?
Is your commission fully staffed now? Do you have any vacancies?
We do
Or
have
should
vacancies.
How many vacancies do you have?
2 at the moment, and so that's been a topic for the last couple of months that I've brought up, and I know Lance has kept me informed on it, and so he's well aware of it, and we are looking. So attendance has been an issue with a few members, so we're trying to make sure that gets straightened out. That's been a topic of mine as chair, to show the importance that we have consistency and so on. So we are working on that. And we are waiting to hear from the administration to see if 2 of those posts can get filled.
We'll talk to administration also. Wanted to find out. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. SAP progress report, Mr. Thurman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, good news. We're done.
Operational, no problem.
We've officially exited the build phase on December 30th. Late that night, we met enough requirements to exit with the extra criteria from the build phase. And
Can you explain that?
So with the different phases, you have a blueprint phase, and then you have a build phase, and then you have some testing phases. So the blueprint phase was completed in April 11th, April 8th, and then we've been on a build phase where we've been designing the system, meeting the municipal specifications for several months. And as you're aware, we had some delays in November and December that we were very upfront about in certain areas such as data, our development, as well as our testing. The municipal staffs and the consulting staffs worked tremendously hard during the holiday weeks, literally, like I said, New Year's Eve, we gave a go-ahead to do that. So we exited the build phase, had a phase of transition into the testing phase, which we began in the sense of January, which is, you've heard the situation, SIT testing 1, which I'll get a little bit more into in a second, but that is good news. Another really good news, which I think is exceptional, one of our areas where we were delayed and struggling in was in the data and how important data is. Well, we had over a 97% data load accuracy in when we entered SIT phase testing. And the gentleman who runs that particular area for a SIT 1 said that he had never been on a project that had such a high initial SIT 1. That was equivalent to SIT 2 and SIT 3 test loads in other projects that he had. Now, we had extra couple months to work on it for sure, but what that means is that when we go into testing and if we find an error, because that's what we're looking for, most likely it's configuration of the system, not because we had bad data going in there, which I believe was a major problem in all the other iterations of this project in the past. Another point that I'll bring up is we are in an automated testing environment. All the prior iterations were municipal employees trying to do testing, not as organized, not as analytical, not as able to determine success, errors, those kind of things. We are in a very automated process, and we have metrics that we can look at, which kind of leads me to where we're at. I saw a lot of positive response from the assembly as we were doing in November and December, focusing on the key areas that were our critical paths to success. So I've actually redesigned this presentation to you, or your packet, a little bit different than what was included in the past, so that you can see exactly what we're focusing on for the success of the project on a daily basis. You can kind of see a point in time on that, but there are some different tables in here and charts than what you've seen, and I'll talk about them here as we go through. But these, in my opinion, are the critical factors that we need to be monitoring on an ongoing basis to ensure as we move through. If you remember, we have a SIT 1, a SIT 2, a SIT 3, a parallel payroll test, and a user acceptance test. So we have several rounds of testing going on, and we're literally in our second and third week of our first testing round.
So I know we had kind of an initial goal time frame, and we pushed it back. So how far behind are we based on either of those, or are we back on track?
Well, you never catch out of Mr. Dunbar, but we were initially wanting to be where we were at on December 30th. We wanted to be at on October 28th, so we were approximately 2 months late. The project at that point in time had a buffer of those weeks in it to be able to still allow us to keep on our June 19th payroll go live and our July 3rd targeted full system go live. And if you just want to flip over, since you brought it up, Mr. Dunbar, the very last page there, we have a brand new schedule that we put on. It's literally the last thing on the document right there. We now have a schedule that's broken down by week so that everyone can actually see where we're expecting to be, and we're strictly looking at the testing to go live phases as there. In the past, there would have been buffer weeks there. We would have said, oh, we might be able to finish early, and then how we're going to make it. Well, there's no buffer weeks anymore in that particular. So what I say, are we on? We're right where we need to be, but we have no additional opportunity to lag, which is concerning. But we're not behind per se. We're right where we need to be, but we don't have any contingency broke into that. And I can talk about this a little bit more, but this basically lays out some of the SIT testing and that I just mentioned, and the different payroll, different testing phases that we're going into. So I've also been told we've never been this far on the project ever before, so that is a good thing, especially in the testing phases. So we are very excited to be as far as we are. I know the municipal employees that are working on this project at this point in time, who have been on it for many, many years, are also excited to at least finally be in the system and being able to test. With that being said, we go to the first couple of the first two tables there. This is the brand new one. These are the ones that actually are the diagrams or showing us where we are in testing, how well our testing strategies are going. With that being said, we are a little bit behind where we would like. We had a slower startup than where we would like to be, but we're able to look at that. And if you're just looking at the first one there where it talks about the two yellow columns, those are the ones that are probably the most important for from a generality standpoint, remember we have an HCM, which is our HR side, and we have the finance and logistics side. But through the 18th, we had executed 215 scripts out of a 1,500 that need to be done. But we had hoped to be at over 400. So we're currently working on a mitigation strategy of working weekends and nights and additional hours to be able to try to make that up. But I will look, if you look to the column right to the left of that, there's 213 that have passed. So of the 215 we did run, 213 of them have met the SIT 1 requirement for what they were attempting to show there. And if you move down to the 501, you can see that they've executed more towards their goal. However, they've had some additional, not as many have passed. My point is that this is what this is for. We are trying to identify problems, defects. When you're building the system, you're building it in silos. Now what we're looking at is beginning to end processes to make sure that they follow all the way through. That's what we're gonna do 3 whole complete cycles of, to make sure that at the end of the 3rd one, from beginning to end, all of our processes are working. So our goal here is we have a 6-week SIT 1, and then there's a 2-week break fix period. So they're fixing them as we go along, but we also have a 2-week after we end that to keep fixing these things, and then we start all over again.
Before you continue, let me just ask a question, okay? Because the SAT SIT is a new phrase, at least it is for me, so what is it? stand for?
System integration testing.
Thank you. Please
So you're
continue.
testing
Yeah.
system all the way from beginning to end.
Thanks.
And then what's gonna happen in 2 and 3 is they run the exact same thing over and over again from beginning to end. And the defects that have been fixed are supposed to be done, so the next time you're supposed to be able to go faster and have less defects. That's the intent. And then when we get to user acceptance testing, that's when they turn it over to the municipal staff, and they spend a month just trying to break it at that point in time. But my point here I want to make is we have analytics, we're looking at it, we're monitoring it every day, we're looking at ways to get caught up, we're looking at how well we're doing, and we can monitor from SIT to SIT how well we're doing on an ongoing basis. So we look at this every single day. Another component on the next page there was from a development standpoint. As I mentioned, we exited on the 30th, but we still had a couple of development objects that weren't ready, that needed to be ready for SIT 1. So this is our chart that is monitoring the success throughout the history of that development. You'll see some huge jumps there in December when we were putting screws, everything to make it to that particular point. What's left are some very complex interfaces, and they're taking a while to be able to get it. For example, our budget load interface, Maximo interfaces, and our Telestaff interfaces are in that particular thing. So this is our tool that we're using to make sure that, one, we get all of our development objects delivered, and we have a status of where they're at and how they're progressing. In addition to that, the chart below that is actually, we have things that we're targeting for development for the 2nd SIT and the 3rd SIT. So we're trying to make sure we're not losing sight of things that are on the horizon as well. So that's from a development standpoint. So you have testing, you have development, and then the other area that is happening right now is we are reloading data again, because we reload data every single time with more current information. So we're going through that particular process as well, and we're actually going to be loading transactional data this time, which we did not load at SIT 1. So it's kind of ramping up. You see the system coming to life, more data, more involvement, more objects, all that testing and so forth. From a financial status update on the top there, this is not complete, but we're still waiting for a couple of utilities to give their final numbers. But last year, about $1.25 million was spent or allocated to muni labor out of the $4 million. If you remember when we went for funding, that's what's been allocated to that. We still have the first 6 months of this year as well that would be charged to that. But that's the updated number. I know you get that kind of information from Zig when he does his report, but that's going to be accurate. We give that to Lance from a budget standpoint, and hopefully next week we'll be able to look at that and how it affects the budget. And then, as I mentioned on the bottom there, that's our brand new schedule that we're targeting, new tasks, new deliverables, being able to look at that. So that's kind of what's going on. And then, as always requested, is kind of a highlight of what's on the horizon from an assembly perspective. There is a item on the consent agenda for Tuesday for half of what I was referring to in the past. That is our HEC contract, and That's a critical point, a document or entity for us, because we have to have all these servers to be able to put our production environment on when we're ready to go live. That contract is the building of all those servers, as well as the administration of those all into the future, the operational portion of that. So it's referred to as HEC, as we talked about. We have a February 1st deadline to kind of get that, because it's going to take 5 months to be able to buy, for the SAP to purchase, configure, and hand over all those servers, so that when we're ready to do our cutover on here, we go from a test development environment into the production environment. And that's what you're going to be having before you on the 24th, is the contract that would allow us to go ahead and negotiate with SAP to build that environment. And then there will be another half of that to administer that towards the end of February and early March time period.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, in terms of servers, did we budget for new servers, or what's are we renting, and where are they gonna be physically located?
Okay, the system is in Santa Clara, California, and then backed up in Virginia someplace from a backup standpoint. We don't actually purchase the servers, SAP would purchase them, and what we're paying is the monthly charge to rent them. And if we've been doing that for a year and a half now in the development side. We've had all the quality boxes, test environments, training environments, and so forth. We've held off on the production environment to ensure, one, we had the time period because we didn't need it to the end, but also to ensure we knew all of the configuration that needed to take place. So there's not a capital outlay for purposes of buying servers, but there is an operating budget item to pay for the monthly administration of those servers.
It may be different servers, but at one point we were talking about co-locating with the school district at the base or something.
I think that's currently, you know, with our system and needing for stability, with where we're at from all the tests and so forth, I think it makes sense to probably keep them where they're at from a production standpoint. But I do believe the long-term viewpoint should be for the municipality to look at all options that, one, provides the service and that we need, and the availability of those servers up at the most reasonable cost to the municipality of Anchorage in the long term. So I think that
Can they be remote or not?
right, and that would dovetail to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Teal. I have a question in terms of renting the service. Why rent versus purchasing?
I would anticipate it's $5 million for them to buy these 99 servers that they're gonna buy, on top of the fact that we've already got 250 that are on. So it's really a capital outlay perspective, but in addition to that, it goes back to the municipality also having the staffing that has the knowledge base to be able to administer that. And then also we have to have the facility. I don't know if we're using, we have to, I mean, 300 servers in it's a big entity to be able to do that versus, you know, the mainframe that we currently have. But I think it goes to knowledge base, capital outlay that we would have to upfront, and then our experience and availability and knowledge to be able to administer the system on that kind of service.
So in terms of cost benefit, it's more reasonable to just rent them?
At this point
At
in
this time,
yes.
but not indefinitely?
Yes, absolutely. If we were, long-term municipality was one able to come up with the capital funding to purchase the servers, and we were able to find enough staff to be able to run it and administer it, it would always be more cost-effective to have it internally.
That's what I
Absolutely,
thought.
but
Thank you.
that's
ways down there.
that's
I
hard.
don't see any other questions. You want to continue, please? Thank you.
That actually is the end, so I'll take any questions that you
Okay.
have.
Any questions, Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, how are we doing personnel-wise? Have you got all the people that you need to move forward? Are you currently advertising to hire additional people, or where are we at with?
Well, I'll give you two different answers, Mr. Peterson. I know that the IT department, you know, they are looking at their staffing with accordance with what their budget has, and they're attempting to hire some people to do a variety of IT-related functions. We are, I think, unfortunately, losing a few of our subject matter experts in key municipal departments, and that is troubling from a project standpoint to be able to get the system live. I know they're hiring people, but you know, it's gonna take a while for them to gain the skill set and the knowledge base. So we have 3 or 4 areas where we're doing the best we can because we've lost a very experienced person to be able to do that. On the project side, SAP is a global company, so they're able to add and take away resources pretty much at will. So they're not having any problems finding some people if a need were to come up in an area where we needed to backfill or have some additional resources.
Okay, great, thank you.
Have a three-part answer.
Ms. Dombrowski, do you have any questions? Ms. Dombrowski?
Sorry, I had to take you off mute there. No, I don't have any questions right now. Thank you.
You're welcome,